class war against the 99%, the likes of which we have perhaps never seen before. All right, number one, massive corporations are being liberated from Trump's tariffs while the little guys are getting screwed. Stocks were up yesterday after the Trump administration announced significant exemptions to their 145% China tariffs that would be particularly beneficial to so-called Magnificent Seven companies like Apple and Nvidia. This is, of course, no accident. Nvidia's CEO recently paid at least $1 million in order to attend a Trump super PAC dinner where he was presumably able to have an audience directly with the president. Apple CEO Tim Cook gave $1 million to the Trump inauguration and has been quietly courting Trump for years. With his shitcoin development properties around the world, blatant political favor selling through these super PAC dinners, Trump has created an industrial-scale bribery factory where anyone with the cash can lobby the king for a favor. The fear of this exact dynamic, by the way, is precisely why the power to raise revenue was left to Congress in the Constitution. But while the big guys get the world, the small and medium-sized business owners, they are getting the shaft. Meet Beth, an Iraq War veteran and the founder and CEO of Busy Baby.
A problem solver by nature, I decided to create something to keep our kids entertained and to save our backs and sanity. Parents, keeping your babies busy just got a whole lot easier because of the Busy Baby mat.
So Beth was living this small business dream story. After that Shark Tank appearance, her sales skyrocketed. She was expanding. Walmart and Target came knocking. She was even honored by Trump's Small Business Administration as Minnesota's Small Business Person of the Year. But now, thanks to the 145% China tariffs, all of it, the business, the dream, even her house, which she had leveraged to finance her expansion into Walmart, all of it is on the line. She recently spoke to The Daily about how for her business, the tariffs mean certain death.
I cannot bring this product into the U.S. now. I don't have that kind of money. And what that means then is if I can't bring in that product and I run out of what's in my warehouse now, then I no longer have revenue coming into my business. And what that means is I can no longer pay my employees. I can no longer pay my loans, to which my house is leveraged against. And in about 6 months, I could very, very possibly lose my home.
Now, I want you to understand, Beth had actually planned for some level of tariff. She was ready for that. But right now, she's got a shipment in China of roughly $150,000 worth of product. It would now cost $229,000 to bring that product to the U.S. She doesn't have that cash. She sure as hell doesn't have the cash to spend $1 million to plead her case directly to Trump.
Here's the thing. I'm not in a face-off with the administration because I'm not a player in the game. I'm a pawn. There's literally nothing I can do. And I was coming up with strategies, but then any strategy I came up with, I'm afraid to execute it because the policy changes every 24 to 36 hours.
Now, this is no small bump in the road for Beth. At one point, the interview actually turned extremely dark.
I'm not okay. I'm scared for my friends. I'm scared for myself. Like, they don't understand. This is certain death for us. It is certain death for so many of my friends and myself. Not in the literal sense of, actually, no, I'm not even going to say not in the literal sense, because the very first thought that came to me when he announced the 104% tariff was at least I have life insurance so that there's a way my family can still have a home.
Now, Beth says she's got a big support network and she's going to make it through, but she worries how many small business owners out there like her are facing similarly dire circumstances and are not going to be okay. So, big business, they get Mar-a-Lago dinners, they get special carve-outs, they get their rebounding stock prices. Mom and pop companies get effectively a business death penalty. But that is only one aspect of this class war. Number two, let's talk about those armies of millions screwing in little screws.
Great American workers. You know, we are going to replace
on other
the
networks.
armies of millions of people. Well, remember, the army of millions and millions of human beings screwing in little screws to make iPhones. That kind of thing is going to come to America. It's going to be automated, and great Americans, the trade craft of America, is going to fix them.
So one of the many justifications of Trump's tariff policy, and the one that has, I think, the most popular and emotional resonance, is that it's going to restore American manufacturing might. There are some aspects of that stated goal that I am personally sympathetic to. The first thing that you should know about this alleged goal, though, is that it's not happening. You'd have to be insane to willingly invest in U.S. manufacturing given the wild daily shifts in policy. In fact, Trump's policy incentivizes offshoring and avoiding U.S. markets altogether. But let's assume Trump is able to strong-arm some companies into building some new factories. What is that actually going to look like? There is nothing inherently good about factory jobs. In fact, the early days of U.S. industrialization were a horror show of child labor, low wages, miserable living conditions, company towns, and deadly accidents. Go read The Jungle by Upton Sinclair or The History of the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire for a refresher on how workers were treated at that time. It is instructive to reflect on the fact that Trump is not calling for a return to 1950s-style industrialization when progressive-era reforms, high union density, and an expanding social safety net meant that dad could work in the factory and support a family. Instead, Trump is inspired by the Gilded Age president William McKinley. He models his administration, he said this repeatedly, after a time when American workers, many newly arrived immigrants, crowded into ghettos and worked in sweatshops as robber barons commanded ever greater portions of the economy. Instead of restoring 1950s working class stability, he wants American workers to be pushed into the global race to the bottom. That goes hand in glove with the DOGE efforts to destroy government's ability to regulate business and Trump's onslaught against unions. In fact, the U.S. already does produce more than every country on earth except China. But due to automation, that production no longer requires nearly as many workers. And thanks to attacks on unions, those jobs are not nearly as good as they once were. As Matt Bruning points out, McDonald's workers in Denmark, they actually make more than Honda workers in Alabama. Bottom line, Trump wants to bring back the sweatshops of the early industrial revolution, not the union-backed middle-class jobs of your grandparents' era. The work would be low-paying, difficult, and lacking in labor protections. Not to mention that we're talking about far fewer jobs anyway, since robots would be the ones enlisted to screw in those little screws. Now, a third element of Trump's tariff-fueled class war is his desire to shift funding the government away from the income tax and towards the tariff.
To me, the most beautiful word, and I've said this for the last couple of weeks, in the dictionary today, is the word tariff. It's more beautiful than love. It's more beautiful than anything. It's the most beautiful word. This country can become rich with the proper use of tariffs.
Did you just float out the idea of getting rid of income taxes and replacing it with tariffs?
Well, okay.
Were you serious about that?
Yeah, sure, but why not?
Trump, of course, likes to pretend that those tariffs will be paid by foreign countries. That's just not true. Just remember again, our small business owner, Beth, she had to abandon her shipment of goods in China because she can't afford to pay herself the tariff. Now, if she could afford to front the tariff, she would then instead have to pass a significant amount, if not all, the cost of the tariff on to consumers, pushing her $30 busy baby mat up to, let's say, $50. So in practice, tariffs are a consumption tax, and since working class people spend a far greater percent of their income on goods than the rich do, the tax is directly regressive, hurting the poorest people the most and leaving the rich largely unscathed. A Yale Budget Lab analysis found the average American would face $3,800 in increased costs from the April 2nd tariffs, with the impact falling hardest on the lowest end of the income scale. And at the same time, Trump is, of course, planning a massive multi-trillion-dollar tax cut for the rich. Large cuts of Medicaid, Social Security is being destroyed, and rich tax cheats are going to be able to more easily avoid income taxes thanks to a gutted IRS. In practice, this means that the working class is going to increasingly be forced to shoulder the burden of funding the government and, frankly, their own oppression as the budget tilts away from social spending and towards the police state. After all, Trump and the Republicans' new budget calls for a mass expansion of the military, a record-breaking $1 trillion Pentagon budget, also calls for a dramatic increase in funding for ICE and to dole out for private prison contractors to create mass detention centers. As we covered earlier yesterday, Trump told El Salvador's President Bukele that next he wanted to send, quote, homegrowns to rot in the CCOT torture dungeon. It has never been more clear that what begins with immigrants will rapidly expand to American citizens in an effort to silence and intimidate dissenters. I doubt, however, that effort to quash all dissent is going to succeed, because already the American people are not buying what Trump and Batya are selling. People can see what is being done to them to enrich Trump and his oligarchs, which is why Trump's economic approval and overall approval are plummeting. CBS has a new poll out which asked Americans who will benefit from Trump's trade and tariff policies. 74% say the wealthy, 71% say large corporations, only 42% say the working class, and only 39% say small business. What's more, only 21%